Nicely timed there, Shane. Hi, everyone. Back again with another installment of The Followers. And this week we are going to chat to you about supplements and just some of the main ones that may be beneficial from, say, possibly a sporting perspective or a training perspective. But yeah, we're going to stick to those for this week, and then next week we'll follow up with a second installment on supplements where we might look down the line of more health-focused supplements. So yeah, so let's get going. Although Shane, you were laughing there at the start. Was there anything funny that we wanted to start with, or?
I actually can't remember what I was laughing about. I just remember it was almost like getting caught in school when I saw like the light went on for recording. I was like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. Crap, Damon's going to give it to me. But no, but I'm very sorry for interrupting the podcast.
That's all right.
So just to start us off, I find tend to work quite well, and well, even before I go into those, generally said that supplements are there to supplement your diet, and they're usually, like, ideally we wouldn't need them. They're only there for kind of extraordinary circumstances where, based on your diet or your particular training needs, you need this little bit extra. If you're already missing it, like if you might have an intolerance to something that you may need to supplement somewhere else, or if you're training particularly hard for a block of time, you may need to just get something else in to support that training. And they're the main reasons for them. They're not the thing that's going to take your training from 70% to 95% or whatever like that. I think that should be kind of made clear as early as possible. Just on that then, so 4 that we'll probably stick to today, because we have found they work quite well with the majority of people, are whey protein, creatine, caffeine, and what was the 4th one?
We're going to talk about maybe nitrates, beetroot juices or something like that. Yeah. I suppose we'll jump straight into it, and maybe we might break down a little bit on whey protein, on some of the I suppose some of the things to consider with whey protein from the outset. While we're talking about supplements here, that whey protein can be considered to be a food in itself, and I suppose it is a byproduct of creation of cheese. So it is as a result of that. So it can be considered a food group. But one of the issues with approaching it from that perspective, in my opinion and from my experience, is that people can overly rely on it and kind of look at it as a food, as like it's just to increase my protein intake, and people can tend to become a little bit too focused on that. And while it's a brilliant source, it's a highly bioavailable source of protein, it doesn't give us much, if anything else, in the line of vitamins, minerals, or other energy sources. So it's quite limited. So while it can be quite beneficial, it's quite limited in nature too. So an overemphasis on including it in your diet for your protein source could leave you quite open or to, I suppose, lacking in other areas.
You said bioavailability there. What does that mean?
So that the bioavailability would be the ability of its absorption, basically the ability of a body to absorb it. So it's highly absorbable in nature, in comparison to, say, if you were looking down a food group perspective. If you're looking at, say, plant-based proteins, possibly that the protein sources in them may not be as readily absorbable, so we don't necessarily get, I suppose, on one side, the amino acid profile from them, and we don't necessarily absorb the full amount of protein in, say, some plant-based proteins. But all foods have their own bioavailability. It just happens that whey protein is right up there at the top of the list from an absorption perspective.
I think one of the most important things to remember with protein is that, like, the whey protein, there's about, what, 24 grams per scoop. Like, ideally, you need a certain amount of protein to get the benefit from your training for general health and stuff as well. And that's in or around the 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kg. So for an 80 kg athlete, you're talking between 130 maybe and 100 and, oh, maths are after failing me now, between 130 and 170 grams a day. Ideally, that would come from animal sources. Now, if you're getting 160 grams of protein a day that mainly comes from animal sources, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to supplement with any kind of extra protein, whether it be whey, casein, whatever like that. If you do struggle for whatever reason to space it out throughout your day, then whey protein is probably the easiest way to supplement that in, whether it be through adding it into your Shane's favorite porridge oats in the morning, or having a shake throughout the day, or having it mixing with some yogurt, like if you've a chocolate flavored one or whatever like that, mixing with yogurt as a dessert at some stage as well. It's just a very easy way to add it in. But in terms of like it being what takes you to the next level, if you're already getting enough whey protein, realistically, it's going to have a very little impact on your overall health performance, whatever like that.
It's more like, yeah, I definitely don't see a problem with whey protein. It's a very good supplement. It's just the benefits of it are blown so out of proportion at the moment. Like it's sold as if it's hugely anabolic. It's the next big thing. It's going to make you gain 20, 30 pounds of muscle, when it's just not true. If you can get that exact same protein through animal products, through different food. It's not necessary. It's just a handy way of filling in the gaps if you can't get it. And it's if you're stuck for time, it's very handy. Like, I do use it a bit myself, but again, it's to meet my protein goals rather than just to get my necessary whey protein shake in a day. It has to all revolve around those protein goals rather than the supplement you use to get it. Because I'm sure you lads are the same, but pretty much any time I talk nutrition with any athlete or any person, one of the first questions you'll get is, what sort of protein should I buy? Should I get this? Is this a good one? When it should be, how much protein should I get in a day? Or what are the best protein sources, rather than which product should I buy? This one has a shiny tag, can I get this one? It's just everything's blown so much more out of proportion with whey protein when it really shouldn't be.
The guy in the ad,
marketing.
The guy in the ad holding up this bag of protein had a 6-pack, so I assume this is the best type.
Yeah, I mean, completely ignoring the fact that the rest of his diet, his training, everything could be influencing that, as well as a number of other factors. But it does have a place, and I think that's one of the big things that it can be quite useful. So, say you mentioned, Shane, there that, like, if time is an issue, say if you have training in the evening and you have a drive ahead of you, which a lot of people do post training, that they might not get to eat their meal post training, or traditionally their dinner, until quite a while after they've finished. And if you happen to have to recover in a certain window before you go training again or before you play again, then possibly having a whey protein shake there post training might get your recovery process going and speed that up in some degree, or at least just begin the recovery process. But I find that I would take the approach of, like you, Shane, like including it with overnight oats or porridge in the morning, just to increase the protein content of meals that may not be protein sufficient. Say, one of the things that I love making, and I think the whole country has almost perfected it during lockdown, is banana bread. And just to increase the volume of protein, or the quantity of protein that would be in that, which normally would be very low, including some I use vanilla whey in the mix for that. And that, while it doesn't, it doesn't give me a huge amount, it still contributes towards my overall protein intake in the day. So from that perspective, it also adds flavor to what I'm having. That could be beneficial for the likes of your overnight oats or your porridge, or mixing in with some yogurt or something like that. So it definitely has a place where it can fit in. But it is really important for people to remember that it isn't this, band-aid that fixes everything, or that sorts everything, and that push you into this anabolic window or anything like that. it is limited in nature then outside of that.
What you say on some
It's
of the
also
other,
kind of, we went through the marketings.
Sorry,
Sorry,
what
go
you
on.
say, Damien, on some of the other benefits of other types of protein is that like you're not getting much else along with whey, and even just in terms of enjoyment of food, like there's so much more enjoyment in eating a nice well done steak or even some well seasoned chicken, or making a nice omelette with some flavored bacon and that, as opposed to drinking your shake, like, and even just in terms of overall appreciation of food.
Yeah, exactly. That it's incredibly important from that perspective, that you do want to enjoy the food you're eating while trying to hit your goals. And slugging back a protein shake isn't necessarily going to be, that enjoyable the whole time. While it can be beneficial, it can be handy, for people who are stuck for time or limited in resources on any given day, especially in their own training, that depending on it and focusing on it too much can really, miss the wood from the trees a little bit. And that our diet overall is really what matters. Ensuring that you are having enough protein in your day for muscle recovery, as well as everything else that goes on with it is incredibly important. But it shouldn't be at the expense of our intake of other nutrients that we get from food naturally. So yeah, while we can consider whey technically a food source, it is incredibly limited in that we don't get anything else from it other than our amino acids.
Two then I'd probably find the most beneficial, and both work quite opposite to each other, one the short term, one the long term, are creatine and caffeine. So we might touch on caffeine then first. Just I know you're quite a fan of caffeine, just throughout your day in general, Shane. So if you want to start us off a bit on it there.
He never touched the stuff. Yeah, I suppose with caffeine, the first thing you're going to have to look at for people is, we kind of touched on a little bit last week, but kind of around recovery. So you're always going to have to balance up if the benefits you're getting from caffeine, especially if you're doing it late at night, is going to be worth the lack of recovery you're getting. So you're going to have to balance, like, fair enough if it's a championship game you have, fair enough, all for it, get the caffeine in. Whereas if it's a training session on, say, a Monday, a light enough training session in the evening, there's no point in going hammering hard on caffeine. So you get performance benefits for that session, then your recovery is down for the next couple of days and you don't recover properly. So caffeine is a very good supplement. It's very scientifically backed. It's probably one of the most researched along with creatine. So like the benefits are definitely there, but it does have lasting effects beyond what you feel. So you might not necessarily feel caffeine 4 hours after you've taken it, but it's still in your system and it's still plugging away. It's clogging those androgen receptors, and you're not going to be able to recover as efficiently. There's no getting around that. No matter, like, it's the same when people say, oh sure, I'm grand, I can survive off of 4 hours of sleep. You can survive off it, but you're not nearly as effective as you will be with a full night's sleep. So the caffeine is always just important to make sure people are weighing up the benefits, the pluses and the minuses, because caffeine's so readily available in society as well. So some people will be taking a caffeine supplement before they go out at 7 o'clock, having had 3 coffees and a can of Monster at some stage during the day as well. That's just overloading on caffeine. It's going super late at night. There's no possible way you can recover fully off the back of that. So kind of the benefits of caffeine are fairly wide known. I just like to kind of really hammer home, there is not necessarily a negative side effect to it, but if you don't use it properly, it can negatively affect recovery much more than it positively affects performance.
What are some of the different ways we can take caffeine? So if we are to supplement with it, how would one go about that? What are some of the options?
Well, I suppose first off, everybody's favorite is coffee. So coffee is a great way to get caffeine in. The only thing is it fluctuates very much how much caffeine is in your cup of coffee, or how much caffeine, is in your cup of coffee, depending on what type of coffee, where you get it. There's so many different factors, so it can be tough to rely on getting the same amount of caffeine in if you're kind of bouncing around getting coffee wherever you go for a match, not kind of making your own. You can take a caffeine supplement like a tablet, which again can be good but can be quite strong, and it's also something you'll definitely have to pre-test or play around with training a bit, because it's something that a powdered caffeine supplement or a tablet is something that can really mess with your stomach if you haven't taken it before, and you can just feel very off and all kind of set you off. So it's, again, like we were talking about last time, it's important to have that pre-game strategy. So if caffeine is part of it, don't mess around. Find a kind of a caffeine product that works well for you. So it'd be the same with chewing gums or different things like that. Like, yes, they can work. Yes, they deliver caffeine, but make sure that you've tried it before you try that new supplement. Is my advice.
Yeah, just on that, I was working with a team one time, and some of them knew about caffeine. They weren't really sure, so I used to have different options for each player. 2 or 3 lads really like tablets. 2 or 3 lads like a pre-workout. One lad came in with a massive coffee before a game. It's just adapting to what the player likes themselves. 1 or 2 other players were eager to find out, what is this stuff, how does it work? So one Sunday morning with an internal game, and I gave one lad a caffeine tablet, and at half time he came up to me white as a ghost, said, "What did you do to me? Like, what do you have to do to me? I can't go up. What's wrong?" So he knew it just didn't suit his system. And I'm just so glad he took that in an A versus B game that was largely unimportant, as opposed to first round of championship or something like that. What I've noticed as well,
but it happens so often. Players are so eager to try something new. Like, if somebody has something new in the dressing room, they're like, "Oh, give me one of them." Or like, if your best player is taking a caffeine chewing gum supplement, you're gonna be like, "Right, well, he is streets ahead of the rest of us. Maybe it's because of this supplement," rather than thinking probably because he does 3 hours extra training than everybody.
Yeah.
With the tablets as well, I think it's worth maybe a little bit of extra hydration, because caffeine will slightly dehydrate you. Now, if you're getting most of that like through a pre-workout blend that's mixed with water, or even a coffee, you're getting a decent amount of fluids there. Whereas when you're having it through a tablet, the dehydration effect can be quite a lot. I noticed that anytime I take them, my mouth gets very, very dry from it. So you need to plan a little bit extra in terms of hydration around that too. Damien, what have you noticed around caffeine?
Yeah, I suppose you've touched on some of the the ergogenic effects of it, and the benefits. But I suppose one of the things I want to touch on there is that you mentioned at the outset, Shane, that some people will, your caffeine intake, that everyone kind of leans towards your coffee and stuff like that, or your energy drinks, like your Monster Zero Energy and stuff like that. But a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to the overall amount of caffeine that they're taking in their day, especially in their day-to-day lives. Now, the recommended upper limit for adults is at 400 milligrams per day. However, if you're kind of getting up to that range, or you find that you're having a coffee or two in the morning, and you regularly then maybe you might train in the evening and you jump for maybe a can of Monster, which is 200 milligrams in it, you could very easily be going over your daily intake. But like Shane mentioned, that the half-life of caffeine in your system is up 6 to 8 hours. So anyone training in the evening really should be careful or be aware that caffeine is a stimulant, and that while you may not be feeling it, it's still active in your body. So it can have a real negative impact on your sleep. The other thing to keep in mind too is if you're using caffeine as an ergogenic aid for sporting performance, say for the likes of championship or any actual games that aren't like Sunday morning challenge games, that if you've built up a tolerance to it, that you may not actually benefit from the supplementing of it for your performance. That you may not get that that stimulating performance effect that you're hoping for. While it does increase, endurance and strength outputs, and it's very strongly linked with those. It is worth noting that you can you can get yourself into a situation where daily intake of it being at a higher level, that when you go to use it as a supplement to perform, that it may not necessarily give you the output that you're looking for. So as you can kind of create a sort of an intolerance to its effects. So that's something that, and I suppose that's down to habitual caffeine intake. It just it's worth taking note of. So if it is for sporting performance, that that you're just, maybe you cycle it. If you do have coffee every day, that you don't go overboard. You're not having a coffee when you get up in the morning, followed by another coffee at 10 a.m., followed by another coffee at 1, followed by another caffeine supplement to get you through the evening, or like could it be a one of those energy drinks, or another coffee in itself. That you're trying to be a little bit more focused with it, and maybe focus your liquid intake through the likes of water and other drinks throughout the day, if you're looking to then use it as a performance aid. But the big thing is to practice that. Like you said, like your example there, Murph, with your young player there, like that's that can go so many other ways too that are not as pretty to witness.
Sprinting to the toilet.
So it is incredibly important that you've experienced with it. If you don't intake any caffeine, then you certainly don't try it out on a championship day. In fact, I would be very strict in this, whether it's GA or whatever sport you play, you don't try anything new on a game day. That if you haven't practiced something for a training game or a training session, or just even tried it out yourself away from a field session or a team session, that it should never be brought in on that performance day. They're my main points with it, really.
Just on dosing.
But Damon never scores in the championship.
I'm not allowed.
He's the same.
Dosing and dosing strategies, it's worth being aware of how much is in each type of caffeine. So your instant coffee, 2 spoons in around 80 milligrams. Then your upper level Starbucks, they can be around 180, 200 milligrams in your large, or whatever the fancy Starbucks name for large is. They can be up quite high in terms of caffeine content. You mentioned your Monster, I think they range between 150 and 200 milligrams. Your pre-workouts, they're generally around 200 milligrams as well per scoop, but that'll vary. Caffeine tablets, the Pro Plus, I think are 50 milligrams, but I think the packet says take 2 at a time, so that dose is 100 milligrams. Your MyProtein tablets, the ones I'd usually use, are around 200 milligrams. So a lot of lads who would be on that upper limit of, like, a lot of caffeine, I'd often see would take MyProtein that's 200 and a Pro Plus that's 250. But that's very much on the upper limit of caffeine you would take. Bear in mind as well that caffeine takes about 40 minutes to an hour to actually be absorbed before it kicks in and has an effect. Remember, some players used to ask, could they take the 200 milligram one an hour before the game and then the 50 milligram one at half time? But realistically, the game will be over by the time that second tablet kicks in. And if anyone looks to take the carbohydrate gels with caffeine in them, they will also be, because it's being absorbed with caffeine or with carbohydrates, that will slow down the absorption of caffeine. So that's going to spread that out when it actually kicks in, and it's also going to slow down at the far end when it finishes having an impact on your sleep, whatever like that.
The other thing, Damon kind of briefly touched on it there, but if you're having caffeine, if you do stop feeling the effects of caffeine, it's not necessarily a good time to just double your dosage before a game. So if you're saying, oh, well, I didn't feel the effect last week, I'm just going to take 2 scoops today. It's usually something that you're going to have to change. So either cut back on it in general life, or just look at it in general life. Because again, we're not denying the effects that caffeine has, but it's also a huge placebo effect attached with caffeine. So again, if you're saying if you have a coffee at 9 and 10, then half 12 again, it's just anytime you yawn, pretty much your instinct is going like, oh, must be tired, I have to go get a coffee. Like if that's the way you're living and it's kind of 3-4 coffees a day, your sleep probably isn't where it needs to be. So there's stuff deeper down that you have to look at. If you're having that much caffeine that you need to be double, like I've had athletes before who are like, oh, should I take 600 milligrams before a game? It's like, what? Well, why? And they're like, well, 200 wasn't working, then 400 wasn't working. And I was like, well, soon your heart's not going to be working, like if you keep doing this. So it's not like you can't just keep doubling down. That's not really how caffeine works. So it's important to kind of make sure you're looking at your habits and not exceeding those dosages.
Yeah, that's good. On a once off after a bad sleep to get you through a day or get you through whatever, caffeine may work. But if you're consistently a bad sleeper, caffeine isn't the answer to that. To move us on then, we might start touching, again, I call them the 2 big C's for supplements. But creatine then is the other one that's as well, if not more so, researched than caffeine. Works quite opposite to it in that it's very much over the long term as opposed to caffeine in the short term. But again, can be enough. It's quite a very useful supplement. So what are some ways we've used that there? Damien, you might start us off with it.
Okay, well, when it comes, creatine it's actually it's still being studied, which is fantastic, as there's a couple of new areas in which it's believed that it may have a positive impact on our bodies, and it may even move from being viewed as a sports supplement to being a health supplement. But creatine is we synthesize it from our diet already. Our body does create it. However, with supplementing with it, all we're really doing is we're trying to top up that level that we have in our body to ensure we're at our full level of it. So that's all we're doing when we're supplementing with it. It's not like this doesn't exist in our body. It's part. It plays a big part in our peak power output. So basically, what we're doing is we're just looking to ensure that it's at its top possible amount in our body, and what we don't need, our body will get rid of. So, as I said, it plays a huge role in our peak power. So that could be our sprint, the first, the explosive part of your sprint, taking off there. If it's lifting is your thing, then, your shorter rep ranges, helping you to bring about more of a power output there. But yeah, so that's where it's really beneficial. That's the kind of impact the creatine has on our body. So, I suppose it helps to absorb water into our system as well, which is incredibly important at a cellular level, and it helps to hydrate us at a cellular level there. I think what else do I look at? I usually speak to guys about or to people about supplementing between 3 and 5 grams of it per day, and that it doesn't matter. Some people like to have it prior to a training session. More people, have it, maybe first thing in the morning. I just try to get people to have it at the same time each day, so that they can ensure they keep the routine with it going in more so than anything else.
So some of the big benefits it has is, like, without going into the big science of it, is we've 3 energy systems. So it's basically like 3 different engines working in our body, and depending on what we're doing, we switch from one engine to another. The creatine system provides a lot of support for the phosphocreatine system, which is what does the majority of work in the first 6 to 8 seconds, particularly high output exercise. So one of the best examples you'll see that in action is, if you look back to any 100-meter sprints from the 80s, and Carl Lewis was very strong, you'll notice that around the 70-meter mark, he seemed to get a little burst of speed and kind of pull away from everyone else. What was actually happening there was, around 70 meters, you slow down. You just can't keep that top speed going anymore. Because he was very good at utilizing his creatine system, it wasn't so much that he was getting a burst of speed away from everyone else. Everyone else was slowing down, whereas he was maintaining speed. And it was his creatine system that was allowing him to do that. So as we do a number of sprints, heavy lifts, whatever like that, your creatine system allows you to do it for a little bit longer. Now, if it's allowing you to do it for a little bit longer when you're doing sprints on the field, jumps on the field, just high intensity stuff, you're doing lifts in the gym, whether it be very heavy or not as heavy, but for longer reps, that just allows you to do 1 more rep per set of each exercise 2 to 3 times a week over 3 months. That's obviously going to lead to, again, a muscle, again, strength, again, speed, again, power, whatever it may be. So while caffeine, when we took it before, immediately has an impact on that performance, creatine won't. Some people notice a placebo effect, but realistically it is placebo, it's in their head. But over 3 months, and still continuing to use it in your training and increase what you do in your training, that's where it has its largest effect on performance.
It's definitely, it's much less noticeable. For like to the average person, you don't feel like that instant kick like you would if you're taking a glucose supplement, or if you're taking caffeine, where you feel it straight away. But it definitely, like, the scientific backing behind it it's unrefutable. There definitely is a performance increase. And the other nice thing is that we don't normally associate with sports supplements is it's very cheap, which is always a plus.
Yeah, it's very cheap, and you get quite a lot of it for that cheap price. So it is pretty easy thing to include in your overall thing. The other thing that I touched on at the start, and while it is far less researched, is the cognitive performance and benefit side to creatine. That is, as I said, is being looked into, and it is being quizzed and questioned at the moment. But it may have some benefits in that in a cognitive perspective, whether it be a reduction in mental fatigue, I suppose. From maybe demanding mental activity, maybe from sleep deprivation, or from possible brain injury like concussion, these type of things. There have been observed improvements from supplementing with creatine and ensuring that there is sufficient levels of creatine in the body. So that's something that's very interesting at the moment, but it's still, as I said, it's the lower side of research, as it's almost novel in nature. But there is kind of science showing that creatine, it may improve working memory, especially in people who don't consume meat, or fish products. Maybe you're vegetarians or vegans who might be quite low in natural creatine levels may experience some of the biggest benefits from it. So that's just that was the other side of it.
Yeah, as you say, very cheap, like €20 will probably do you about a year's supply, and also quite good for hair and nails, I think. Just something.
Tell us more, Mark.
Yeah, skin, I think as well.
Something you may notice on the packet is about a loading phase. Are we doing a loading phase with it, Shane, or what way are we going about dosing?
No, I've never really done a loading phase, because as you guys kind of already touched on, like it's naturally reoccurring in your diet, so everyone has probably close enough, I'd say, to 2 grams a day. Again, that's a very general assumption, but people have that amount in them. And again, like Damien said, any excess creatine is just flushed out of the system, so it's essentially just flushing more out of the system to ensure that you get, if you're dosing with that 5 grams, there's no need to go any extra, because that's in around 5 grams is where your body's going to top off. So even at 5 grams, you're assuming you're not getting any creatine into your diet. Whereas I think sometimes the loading phase is up to 20 grams a day for the first week or 2 weeks. Whereas that's literally, excuse the phrase, but pissing your money away. Like when you could, that will just last you. There's no point in it. It's really just, I don't even know where it came from. I'm not really sure even of the backing behind the loading phase, but it's definitely
some
not
research.
There's
certainly some research on it, but I feel like it might be marketing led, because of we touched on there,
making enough money off it.
Well, yeah, like €20 will cover you for probably a year. And it's actually worth noting on this as well that you can get a lot of different type of creatine supplements, but it's creatine monohydrate that you're looking for. Yeah. Anything else is just marketing, trying to make more money off the supplement, and you'll read packages that will honestly make you think, I'm going to be tore in about 5 days after taking this, and it's just simply not the case. All you need to focus on is this creatine monohydrate, that 3 to 5 grams per day, and you can kind of do it. I know people cycle it on and off, but again, since we do synthesize it in our body from our diet, like it doesn't really need an off period. Some people may experience some negative side effects with it, like bloating from excess water retention. In those cases, then it is worth taking a look at whether or not it should be included. But for the mass majority of people, there are huge benefits to topping up that store.
Yeah, just 3 little points to finish off on it there. You mentioned it there. You will hold on to a little bit more water, probably about a kg, maybe a kg and a half. Now, if that's an increase in your weight, it's not from muscle, it's not from fat, it's just a little bit of extra water being held onto by your body. So where it may be worth coming off is if you are a power lifter, a weightlifter, MMA fighter, boxer, trying to make weight, it may be worth coming off creatine for the week or two beforehand, just to help a little bit of water go out. In terms of timing throughout your day, the most important time to take it is when you're most likely to keep taking it. If that's right before bed, if it's when you get up in the morning, if it's with your 10 o'clock tea, realistically it has no impact, if any, small meaningful one. So just whenever you're most likely to take it is what's key. The other bit then, if anyone hasn't taken it before, it's not like protein where it'll blend with water or milk. It doesn't dissolve in water. So you need to put in water and swirl it and throw it back that way, or else just put it straight into your mouth and wash it down with water straight after that.
My man.
It is worth actually like realizing that, like, why isn't it shaking? Why is it blending here with the water? I don't get it. Like, so just be mindful of that. Last one we might look at today then are some dietary nitrates, or beetroot juice, Damien, you mentioned earlier. So what do they do, and how might they be beneficial?
So nitrates kind of basically they do in a very general sense is that they increase the amount of oxygen in your blood. So there's more oxygen flowing around your body, and from a performance perspective, especially like an endurance perspective, if you play any kind of field sports or you middle distance running, long distance running, or cycling or anything like that, that it ensures that there's more oxygen going around your body. So there's, I suppose, it's accessing the working muscles. There's much easier and much more freely, resulting in you being able to perform at a higher level for longer. Is I suppose one way of looking at it, and this it helps with I suppose an increase in blood flow to the working muscles. Some people then, if they're looking at trying to increase their I suppose their nitrates through a supplement, may find that it increases their pump, and blood flow through the working muscles, which can be quite an attractive thing from I suppose a gym perspective. And it's often it's one of the ingredients that you'll find in pre-workouts that people seem to kind of go for, like, oh, this pre-workout I get a great pump from it, and often it is down to the nitrates that are included in the pre-workout and the quantity of them. As well as beetroot, you also get a whole host of other benefits from actually, like I do try to get people to go down the beetroot juice route if possible. However, it is very dependent on taste, and not everyone has an acquired taste for beetroot, whether eating it or drinking it. From a performance perspective, I do. If we can get people eating or having beetroot and drinking it, as you're getting quite a significant amount more there from drinking beetroot than you would if you were to eat beetroot. But it's very taste dependent there to the individual. So it may not be for everyone, in which case you might look down a supplement route in that sense.
You can get concentrated beetroot shots, which even if you don't like the taste, you can just draw it back, which will be quite, the focus on concentrating the amount of nitrates in there. Otherwise, I have seen some people get the large cartons and sip on it for a period of time beforehand. Realistically, your main benefits are going to be for
just eat beets like apples, Damien.
For endurance-based sports, middle distance run quite have nice an impact for anything from kind of 1500 up to 10k there. I have seen some people take it at the same time as caffeine before a game, and just find the two of them going on at once do lead to a bit of an upset stomach. So they just had to focus on one or the other. So that'd be an individual preference thing. Any other bits on nitrates, Shane?
Not a huge amount, to be honest. It's not something I really utilize too much. I try to keep it relatively simple, so it's not. I never really recommend more than kind of 2 or 3 supplements. I usually have the lads on creatine, have the lads on caffeine if they want to, and then after that it would be individuals if they come up looking for something else. If I nearly test them, so I figure out if I have, right, well, what are you eating, what's your nutrition like, what's your macros, what calories are you getting in, and then if they pass that or they can tell me that they have a good grasp on that, then I might invite them in to kind of go into a bit more detail on something like nitrates. But it's not something I use an awful lot at the moment with any of my team athletes. But it's definitely, again, as well as Damo was saying, like, it increases the amount of oxygen around. It also lowers the oxygen cost of kind of sub-maximal exercise. So again, that comes into the endurance. So it makes your body more efficient. So you're using less oxygen for the same results, meaning there's more free oxygen to use then when you need it, when you push yourself that little bit more. So again, I haven't used it, but I definitely do see the benefits there in the research.
It's a very good point around racing that, say short or middle distance races can be quite tactical. You might have a few people running a very, very slow part of the first 1500 meters or 5k. Then the last bit, you would hope you would have conserved a bit of energy in those first couple of laps. So you need to step it up. It's not have as much of an impact on you towards the end.
Yeah, and like it's all just from like helping to, I suppose it does dilate, so it does help to relax and open blood vessels, which I suppose as a result, as I said, increases blood flow, which lowers, as a result, can lower blood pressure. So if this is something you're regularly doing, that this can kind of, especially when you are exercising, can lead to decreased demand on heart and lungs as well. So yeah, just in addition to that.
Yeah, so that's brought us up to the 40-minute mark. So next week we'll start looking at some supplements for just general health, and maybe looking at some that may be recommended and it might be worth considering if they are worth it or not. And if anyone has any questions around specific supplements they take or considering taking, just let one of us know and we'll address that here. Anything else to be said, lads, before we sign off?
I just want to say some of the feedback from people has been brilliant, so keep it coming. It's well received. So yeah, that's been fantastic.
Lovely. Thanks for listening, everyone.
All right. Till next week. Thanks, guys.